Good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Hipley. I'm the Long Range Planning Division Manager at Boulder County Community Planning and Permitting. Thank you for joining us this evening to talk with us about accessory dwellings. While I am going to be giving this initial presentation, I just wanted to take a minute and thank all the staff support that we have here today on the call, because I definitely cannot do this alone. Dale Case, Kim Sanchez, Rick Hackett running the machine, Denise Grimm, Elisa Childress, Andrea Vaughn, and Ethan Abner. Before we get started, I just wanted to lay out a few ground rules, which will hopefully keep us on task, because we do have a lot to cover today in a limited amount of time. So if we can stay on topic and be respectful of people in our time. If you are not talking, please keep yourself muted. When you do go to speak, please raise your hand and then unmute yourself when you're called upon. And please, no advertising verbally or in the chat. Our agenda today is to have a presentation that we think will take about an hour. It does include some polling questions, some pauses for questions and ideas and suggestions. And you can also use the chat to comment and ask questions. So that option is available for you as well. After this first section, we will have breakout rooms that are separated by geographic areas. You'll be assigned into the geographic area you selected when you registered. Again, we have some follow-up questions to dive a little bit deeper into kind of what might be unique about your area and an activity during that session. We really do want this to be an exchange. You know, I know the Zoom format sometimes is hard to have that happen, but that is our goal. And we want to just explore this accessory dwelling idea together here today and learn what you think and what you want us to know about it. So before we dive into the content, if we could just learn a little bit about who's in the room with us today with our first poll question, which is who is in attendance tonight? Okay, so it looks like we have most folks, and the majority of you had homes that were destroyed in the fire, but some other folks as well. So thank you. We're going to follow that with one more question for those of you who were impacted by the fire. Where did you live before the fire? Everyone see the poll results? I'm just not real sure how that shows up. Okay, so we have a distribution of folks from around the burn area as well. Thank you for that. Okay. So now this next slide is really just to get us all on the same page about what we're talking about when we are talking about accessory dwellings. So accessory dwellings are often referred to as accessory dwelling units. They might be known as granny flats, in-law suites, backyard cottages, and many other names.
Hey, Hannah,
Yes.
sorry that it went back to the agenda slide.
Oh, thank you. There we go.
Yep, good.
Thanks. But essentially, an accessory dwelling is a small second residence on a property that has a single family home. That is, the single family home is the primary home on the property, and these additional units are subordinate in nature to that primary home. The accessory dwelling is owned by the property owner. It might be used for the property owner for their own purposes, but it may also be rented to other people to have a home in the area. Currently, the Boulder County Land Use Code includes 3 types of accessory dwelling options. And here's a good place to pause and remind everybody that we are talking about the unincorporated areas of the county today, so not the cities in town, so not Louisville and not Superior. And that is what the land use code covers, is the unincorporated areas. And in the code, there are 3 types of accessory dwellings: a family care unit, an agricultural worker unit, and a historical accessory dwelling unit. And these require a limited impact special use review. So they do require a Board of County Commissioners review. There are various limits about how they can be used. You know, they may be temporary. If the use changes, the structure might need to be decommissioned as a residence or removed. And it does often require annual reporting by owners. So that's where we are with the current land use code. So why are we looking at these now? And the simple answer to that is things change. Housing affordability, the aging of the population, changes in how families live together, ideas about what sustainable and equitable development looks like are all factors that drive change. And the Boulder County Comprehensive Plan was amended in 2019 as a reflection of those broader changes. It now includes specific policies related to housing, which support the reconsideration of accessory dwellings in the unincorporated county. In addition, we know that massive change was experienced very rapidly due to the Marshall Fire in a large area of the county. And it is a point in time where the need for significant redevelopment makes us consider what the future might look like. And we heard from the community members after the fire that accessory dwellings could be helpful both in recovery and afterwards. Adding an accessory dwelling is most easily financed along with the construction of a principal dwelling. And so this is a window of opportunity for many who are rebuilding. And of course, for rebuilding, time is critical. And accessory dwellings were going to be part of the rebuilding equation and part of the solution. We really needed to dive into it now. So let's do that. These next few slides, we're going to walk through a couple of permutations of accessory dwellings, again, just to get us all on the same page about what these might look like, start developing some common language around them, so we know what we're talking about when we talk to each other. And this one, first one, is an integrated accessory dwelling. So these are units that are added interior to the principal or along as part of the primary home. They might be an attic apartment or a basement unit. In this picture on the right, this was a 220 square foot conversion of an extra bedroom. So it could be maybe a main floor master suite with a kitchen. These could have internal access sharing the same front door, or they may have their own private entrance. This next iteration is attached accessory dwellings. And these are dwellings that are sort of tacked on to the principal structure rather than integrated within them. So they may be an addition out the back. These pictures show, this one shows an addition off the side of the house. And then the one on the far right is a unit that was placed over the attached garage. And again, these are only a few iterations of what this could look like. This next option has a really long name, but it's an accessory dwelling that's attached to an accessory structure. So the picture on the right is something that is pretty common. You might have likely seen this somewhere, but it's a unit constructed above a garage. The picture on the right is an option where maybe the unit was attached to the side of the garage. Or these could be tacked onto a workshop. I know we've heard requests for barn, having an accessory dwelling attached to a barn, or it could be attached to really any other accessory structure. And then the last version is an accessory dwelling that's a standalone structure. So it's not really associated with any of the other structures on the site. It's separate and distinct from the house and any of the primary house's supporting structures. So we are going to pause again here and ask, which of the types discussed do you think would best fit into your neighborhood? So it looks to me like not huge variations in what folks might think is appropriate, but maybe mostly in a separate single-story structure. Thank you. We did have a pause here for comments or questions so far, so I don't know if folks have any questions they'd like to ask at this time, or if we have any in the chat that we should respond to.
Hannah, there's nothing in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, I will keep going then. I didn't see any hands raised either. Okay. So as we kind of reviewed the literature, listened to what we heard from you after the fire in our listening sessions, and kind of looked at these across the country, these are some of the benefits that have been, that we've identified through those various means. providing a tool for folks to age in place, whether they live in the main house or the accessory dwelling, providing opportunities for multi-generational living on the property. It does provide additional income to the property owner, adds an option to the housing supply. Small units often provide an affordable or an attainable housing solution. One thing I learned when we spoke to Housing and Human Services about accessory dwellings was that studio apartments in our area are in high demand because they're not commonly built, and they generally rent at a less expensive rate. So, this could provide that type of solution. And also that these really can blend with the neighborhood. So another poll here for you. Based on what we've talked about so far, are you in favor of allowing accessory dwellings? Okay. So we have a couple that are no's or unsures. Thank you. So again, as we were looking into accessory dwellings, there are some common concerns that pop up. And these relate to traffic, potential parking issues, maybe additional development, new structures or structures in different locations could impact features people appreciate. Concerns about increased noise and activity levels, so that kind of maybe the hustle and bustle of the neighborhood, that level of activity might change. Potential diminishment of privacy. So for those of you who may have answered no or unsure, or really everyone, does this list of concerns capture why you might not be in support or your concerns about how these are implemented? Okay, it looks like we're pretty stable there now. So we got some of them, it sounds like, and we're missing some. For those where we didn't capture everything, are there concerns that you can share with us? What are we missing? I don't know if you want to raise your hand or throw that in the chat, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. We have a hand raised. Eve, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, so I am not against ADU in general, but I feel strongly these should be issues that have a policy that's for the Boulder County and not these carved out just for the Marshall Fire. And I don't understand why we're carving these out just for the Marshall Fire. All the reasons, benefits, and concerns are all valid throughout the Boulder counties. I really hope that we actually take these at the county level, have a clear policy like they did in the city of Boulder.
Thank you. I did not mention this at the beginning, and perhaps I should have, but the Board of County Commissioners did authorize us to consider ADUs on a countywide level. This project right now is focused on the Marshall Fire area, mostly due to timing concerns. kind of having this discussion countywide is a much bigger scope of a project and requires that we bring in a lot more people to that discussion. So we're tackling this smaller piece first, but we do intend to pick up that countywide discussion later. You know, the county is a very different area than the city of Boulder. It's much more diverse in its landscapes. It's much more diverse in the types of development that we have in various areas of the county. The county doesn't provide urban level services. So there are some really unique things about implementing or different things than an urban environment that we have to consider in Boulder County when we're talking about ADUs or accessory dwellings. So hopefully that addresses your comment. Thank you for making that. I think it's helpful for everyone to know that there's another piece of this puzzle coming. Any other concerns that this list didn't capture?
Tabor,
We
go
have
ahead.
two.
Hi. I wanted to first thank you all very much for having this meeting, and I think it's really timely, and we're just so grateful that you're doing this public process. So thank you, and thank you for allowing us to speak during the meeting. I just had a question. I wanted to second what Eve just mentioned. I think it's really important to look at this at a countywide level and also to consider who's impacted. Just because we didn't have a structure destroyed, our fire insurance has gone up a lot since the fire itself. And so wanted to consider also folks who were impacted in terms of fire insurance and sort of what counts as an impact. So again, really just wanted to thank you for inviting us and having this public forum.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming and spending your Wednesday night with us.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to just ask if you're considering having different policies in different parts of the affected area, because as you were saying a few minutes ago, different parts of the county have different characteristics, and different neighborhoods are different. You know, more of an agricultural area is more of a residential area. And I think that warrants separate consideration, and it has these different concerns, for example, have different weights depending on where these are. I have one other question is, do you anticipate having a different policy for owner occupied, as opposed to if the owner it lives on site and rents out the ADU, as opposed to building a house that has 2 units on it and renting them both, which basically creates an apartment or whatever.
Okay, let me tackle the first question first. The breakout rooms at the end of this kind of general session are intended to help us learn about the different areas and what the different needs in different locations may be. So we are exploring that, and hopefully you'll participate in that section as well. And then the owner occupied requirement is one we do see come up in other codes. I don't know that we have a strong preference about that now. You know, we don't have sort of something written already at this point in time. This is really early to kind of learn about what you think and tell us what might be appropriate. But it is one of those common things that's in codes. I don't know what the outcome of that would be here. Gary, is there anyone else that we should call on?
No, there's a couple comments in the chat. Different comments about whether or not these should be Airbnbs or prohibited or
Okay,
different opinions.
okay, I think we're getting to some of those questions, and we will definitely dive into them more in the later sessions. So, and we do have access to the chat after this, so staff can refer back to your comments here as well. Let's just,
Eve has her hand up again. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah, thanks for taking my question again. So I'm just wondering if this policy we're discussing now will only apply to the Marshall Fire rebuilding homes, or it's intended to be the same policy apply to the homes in the same neighborhood? So like somebody's home where, damaged and we're not rebuilding. So will we be included with the same policy, or we're going to be excluded? So same neighborhood.
so far, the way the authorization was drafted, it was for folks rebuilding homes lost. But again, these are not final regulations at this point in time. So, I don't know what the outcome is. But what I'm hearing is that you would like for them to be applicable if your property was impacted in some way.
Yeah, I think that would seem to make more sense because you're talking about all the benefits and this and that. So in the same neighborhoods. And because the fire coming that take a strip of a home, the neighborhood away, if all these homes got bought by developer, they're gonna put all the accessory on each of these lots, and that is changing that neighborhood. And also, if these policy only apply to those rebuilding homes, and why so? Seem like the people will benefit most is the ones to go buy that lot to build them, because it will make the lot more valuable and change the character of the neighborhood. And the rest of the neighborhood didn't benefit the policy intended to be affordable housing, income, all those things that you just mentioned. So that's why I just feel quite uncomfortable if these policies we're discussing is totally carved out just for the rebuilding the lots that homes lost in the fire. Seem like it doesn't make good sense to me, because I think we need to have consideration for the rest of the homes in the same neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move on a little here just for the sake of time. Is that advanced? No. Okay. So, really the trick with writing any sort of regulations or establishing parameters is, in the face of acknowledging some of these benefits, if we want to allow these accessory dwellings to occur and realize these benefits, how do we also address the concerns so that these new dwellings do blend in with the neighborhood? And this is where we are getting into some of those common standards and restrictions that we've seen in a variety of other codes, how other folks have approached this. And this is size limitations is one that's in almost all of them. Off-street parking requirements may or may not be the requirement for owner occupancy of the primary or accessory dwelling. In urban areas, these might be restricted to certain zones. There are often architectural related limitations or restrictions. For example, if you do a completely detached unit, it can only be 1 story. The fact that the primary and the accessory dwelling must be sold together. Again, this isn't something that we intend to result in future subdivision. And that these may not be short-term rentals. So I think that that hits on a couple of things, Mike, that you had mentioned. So these are, you know, all of the things that we can talk about and, you know, sort of discuss as whether they're needed or not. So the poll here is, which of these parameters do you think should be addressed in any new regulations? Okay. So it seems like, you know, the things that we find in other codes make sense to the group here for the most part today as well. You know, and conceptually, these parameters are established to do both things. You know, they both achieve the benefits and kind of address any of the concerns. For example, you know, keeping an accessory dwelling small contributes to them being affordable, but can also help minimize any of the kind of concerns about, since they would be occupied maybe by one person rather than a large family. So there might not be the parking impacts or the same level of traffic impacts if there's a larger unit. And being small means they take up less space. So potentially they have less of an impact, you know, less of the impacts that we would normally associate with the development of a structure, kind of on the landscape, on the environment, sort of on kind of new visual components in the neighborhood. One of the questions I had here is there anything, you know, that's not on this list that you think we should be considering? Okay, I don't see hands, and it doesn't look like there's anything in the chat. Okay.
Hannah, you're muted.
I have no idea how that happened. Thank you. This next slide kind of shows different permutations of an accessory dwelling and provides the size of each one. So you can get a sense of what different amounts of floor area or square footage might look like in a design. And so with this in mind, what do you think is an acceptable size for an accessory dwelling in your neighborhood? Okay, so it looks like the middle and upper range are what most folks are looking for. The other component of drafting kind of a set of rules and regulations or parameters is establishing how accessory dwellings might be reviewed, and if the planning and zoning review process might be required or should be required. Permitting processes can range from something that's pretty strict to something that's really permissive. You know, now for the 3 types of accessory dwellings that we have, we require a Board of County Commissioner approval of that use. So if the use, so that is our current planning situation, where we examine if the use itself may be allowed on the property, and through that process, the use could be denied. Other approaches presume that the use, the ability to have an accessory dwelling is a given, that it's allowed, but we might examine the impacts of that development. So our question here is, do you think an accessory dwelling should be presumed to be allowed?
So there's a question in the chat. Is this for Marshall Fire area only or the whole county?
Well, our project right now is focused on Marshall Fire rebuilding. Although, you know, we see that some of the responses that we get through this is sort of taking the temperature on what folks might think countywide. But for now, it's the Marshall Fire rebuilding. Okay, so it looks like, again, we have support.
There's actually the question in the chat from Lars. Go ahead, Lars.
I guess I just want to say something maybe contrary to the idea of making this countywide. I mean, I agree that having this be countywide at some point is important, but I also understand that that will be a long process. And most of the fire impacted folks are planning right now and will hopefully be building shortly. So if this happens 6 months from now or 9 months or a year from now, it's really of no use to the fire impacted folks. So I just want to say that I strongly agree with keeping this to at least the fire impacted areas to start with, as opposed to being countywide.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, so our last poll again shows, you know, some strong support from the folks in the room for presuming that an accessory dwelling would be an allowed use. So, subsequent question. Do you think that neighbors should be notified and allowed to comment on an accessory dwelling proposal in their neighborhood?
So while people are voting, Eve has her hand up. Hannah.
Go ahead, Eve. Thank you. Oh, you're muted.
She put her
Okay,
hand
it
down.
could have been a remnant. I saw it too there after you said something.
Yeah, sorry. Can I, yeah, I just unmuted. Yeah, so I just like to have some enlightenment on why such urgency on this subject matter. Most homeowners don't have enough insurance to rebuild their homes. And then why that you want to put more money, that the considerable more money to do an ADU? And I still thought about it. My only answer come up is that if we allow ADU to the Marshall Fire rebuilding lots, that would make the lots a lot more profitable for the developer come to buy them. And if there really any other reason, other urgency on this matter, I would really like to be enlightened.
We have a couple more hands that might help answer the question for you, perhaps.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Hi there. So we're already deep into architectural and structural engineering, and we need to know if this is even possible. If it is, we need to reassess now, or this is going to cost thousands more. We are underinsured, and what this is going to do for us specifically, Eve, is let us sort of shrink the main dwelling and then add an ADU later on. That's more accessible for us in our situation. And so being able to plan for that while we're spending money on this stuff right now is really important, and we need to know this.
So why wouldn't that be covered by the current county policy? We're all waiting. There are people waiting. We previously have ADU and we were forced to demolish that. So county historically has been extremely restrictive on ADU. And now we're opening all those details, but it's only applied to the Marshall Fire rebuilding and not apply the same houses in the same neighborhood. I just feel really, really uncomfortable about what we're talking about here right now.
Yeah,
Thanks,
well,
Eve.
thank you, Eve. Thanks for expressing that. Let's get some more views into that, and I invite Molly to share her opinion.
Hi, Eve, Gary, and Hannah, and everybody else. For us, the urgency is because as an underinsured homeowner or renter, getting back into putting up an ADU allows us to get back into the neighborhood and assist with building our own house and not have to pay rent anymore in a separate rental property, while we're also paying on construction and an SBA loan and everything needed to build our house. So it's really creating, for us at least, it's creating a dwelling that allows us to live here and not have to leave the area just because of underinsurance. And I agree, it should be addressed across Boulder County, but the urgency for the fire affected houses is absolutely immediate. We have to either figure out whether we can do this, or some of us have to consider whether or not we have to leave the area.
Right.
So you will only do it if the ADU is permitted to rebuild the home, even though you're underinsured, that the insurance wouldn't cover to build the same home you have now. You had it before the fire.
Yes, we are underinsured, but for us to build a smaller, more affordable ADU immediately allows us to manage our finances in a way that allows us to have a longer term to build that house. I can go through the whole planning process and then have my builder not finish my floors, my kitchens, my walls, and I live on that property and can do so. But if I have to live in a rental in Lafayette, then I have to pay rent in Lafayette. I have to pay on an SBA loan. It now makes it unaffordable to return back to my home.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I do wonder how many folks that gonna be benefit from the ADU with your situation, or how many people how many of these lots gonna turn into being bought
I
by
don't,
developers?
Yeah, I don't think we know the answers to those questions yet, but I do think we need to move on in our presentation so we can cover all of the information we needed to tonight. So returning to our poll about notice, it sounds like in this result, we had a little bit of mixed opinions. And so this answer kind of leads us to our next question. I apologize. These later slides here are not fun to look at. It's a lot of text. But providing neighborhood notice and comment times or opportunities requires that we have some sort of planning and zoning review process prior to obtaining a building permit. It means we need to get plans that need to be sent out to neighbors to comment on. It means that we need to have some sort of decision made by, either the director or the board about the project. And there are various levels of that planning and zoning review that could occur. So that's what the next question is. If we want to have that neighborhood notice and comment opportunity, what level should that be? And that's what this next question asks. Oh.
Hannah, can you read the answers? The slide cuts off the text and it's difficult to see what folks are responding to.
Yeah, I just had to make my poll box bigger. So the first response is no review is necessary as long as the accessory dwelling meets certain parameters. The second option was planning review should only be required for accessory dwellings that are separate structures than the primary home. And planning review should be required for all accessory dwellings, or the last response, which nobody chose, was I do not believe accessory dwellings should be permitted. So it sounds like most folks are in favor of establishing some clear parameters that might allow many of these to maybe not go through a review process. Other types, maybe, or ones that exceed whatever those parameters end up being, may require a review. Okay. So there are a lot of resources out there on accessory dwellings. Some of the graphics and content that I used in here was taken from the AARP. They have a document called the ABCs of ADUs, and then an accessory dwelling unit step-by-step guide to design and development. So if you are interested in these and you want to learn more about them, the AARP Livable Communities website has those documents. They're free PDF downloads. And then some of the other materials we used in our presentation today, we got from the City and County of Denver. And those websites also, their website has some information that you might find useful as far as how to do this and what might be required to help you start understanding that. The anticipated timeline for this project, we're at the kind of third bullet point down here, doing outreach and engagement, kind of talking to folks and learning from you. We will move into a drafting phase once we're done. And once we have a draft that kind of establishes some of these parameters, has a maybe process, concept, those sorts of things fleshed out, There will be a referral period. And during that time frame, we do intend to hold another community like this where we can walk through what the proposal is, make sure folks understand what's in there and can provide us feedback at that meeting. We have a staff meeting where we do an internal review. After that public comment period in our internal review, we go back and kind of update and amend the draft, finalize that draft. So it's ready for presentation to Planning Commission, which we expect to happen in July. After which we will prepare for the Board of County Commissioners hearing, which we anticipate being on August 4th. We do have a survey that went live today and will be available through June 1st. Some of these same ideas and questions are asked there. So hopefully you will take that and provide us more insight. If you do have questions or want to make comments, you can reach me at this email address. And there is additional information on the Docket website, which is shown here in the PowerPoint. One thing that's particularly useful on that website is a button where you can subscribe to get updates about amendments to the land use code, so that you'll kind of be looped in for this. We know with people not getting mail regularly and that sort of thing, trying to notify by mail isn't really the most effective. So we do want to move into the breakout portion of our evening. We're running really good on time right now. We do expect the breakout room to be a half an hour kind of discussion, and there's an activity. Ethan Abner and Gary Sampasan will be spearheading the discussion on the east end side of the area. Andrea and I will be talking with the folks in the middle area, and then Elisa and Denise will be chatting with those of you on the western side of the burn area. If you're not a resident of one of these areas and you want to stay for that portion, you can do so, and I think Rick will place you into a room.
So Hannah, there's just a comment in the chat, and then Eve has her hand up, and if there's anyone else wants to ask questions before we go into the breakouts. Phil made a comment that your schedule, your timeline depicts 2.5 months from now, and I think his concern is that feels unworkable for those of us trying to submit for building permits in the next few weeks.
We have talked to a couple of folks who are submitting building permits, and really what my advice to those folks at this point in time is kind of pre-engineer or pre-design your building to think about a space that could be converted later. And a couple folks are doing that.
And then a question about, can we share the survey link on our social media?
Yes, please. Just to reiterate, if you are sharing it on social media, the one thing that's important to convey is this is a survey for unincorporated Boulder County residents. It's not helpful or useful to have folks from the cities and towns participate in the survey, and it kind of won't make our results very useful. So if you do share them, please, if you do share it, please make that clear.
Okay, Eve. I hope you
yeah.
have a new question or new comment.
This is a new question. So this meeting we have now, the only people being noticed to participate, is that's the neighborhood you listed here? Or is there any intent that these will be made known to the Boulder County, the general public?
That's a good question. In addition to notifying the neighborhoods in the burn area, we also did kind of our normal notification countywide to the various email groups of folks that follow these. There was a Rick, what is the word I'm thinking? the press release. So it was the unincorporated Boulder County group helped push the information out to their list of about 410 folks. So there was broader notice.
Yeah, so we only received the letter like today. And only reason we kind of know earlier is one of our neighbor that is on an email list. But most of our neighbor actually know nothing about it until that neighbor that mentioned that. So I was just kind of wondering what the timeline on this is, and seem like, you know, we need to hurry to make some decision, or we're already assuming this is already decided, only the details gonna be, you know, fine tuned.
Well, I think, Eve, what you can see from the timeline, there is going to be multiple opportunities for people to engage and give comments. So this is only the first one. So, you know, please share this information with your neighbors. And, you know, yeah. And I think what we're hearing also in the chat is the timeline is discouraging for people. And they should know that, you know, this is an expedited timeline for the county, but we hear you and understand that. And I would urge you to work with your rebuilding coordinator, which has been mentioned in the chat, to explore options. Hang on, Eve, hang on. I want to just finish. Thank you. So to explore potential options for you to perhaps, you know, incorporate some ideas about ADUs in your design that you know, if this does come to fruition.
So how many homes are exactly in the Boulder County? I know all over is like over 1,000, but how many actually in the unincorporated Boulder County that we're looking at?
Yeah, so Eve, I would suggest we want to really stay focused here and move into the breakout rooms, that you reach out to Hannah directly, and we'll put her email address in the chat to ask some of these larger county-wide questions. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Rick, are you ready to put us into rooms?
Yes, hi all, this is Rick Hackett staff. I'm going to enable the breakout rooms. I have put you in the rooms based on what you entered on the registration form. A few of you didn't indicate that you were a resident, so I randomly placed you in rooms. You should be able to leave a room and go to a different room if you'd like, but I will open the rooms now. And Hannah, I believe, what was the kind of time you were planning to have the rooms open for the smaller discussions?
We have a half hour planned for a couple of questions and an activity.
Okay, I will start the rooms now and you'll be moved over. It will take a few seconds, but I will open the rooms now, and there's a pretty good distribution of about 15 people in each room. So you have a nice small group to talk. So hold on, everyone.